The Black Friday curse. Black Friday brings out the worst in people. I'd always thought it was a little ridiculous, watching grown adults shove and claw at each other for a toaster or a pair of headphones. But last year, I joined the chaos for the first time and the last. My name is Tom, and this is the story of how a $99 TV ruined my life. It started with an ad, 75-inch smart TV, only $99, limited stock. I didn't even need a new TV, but the deal was too good to pass up. Besides, my old set was ancient, the screen scratched and fuzzy. This was an opportunity, or so I thought. I arrived at Big Saver Mart at 4 a.m., the parking lot already a war zone of angry shoppers and abandoned carts. The air was bitterly cold, my breath visible as I joined the shivering crowd. When the doors opened at 5, chaos erupted. People surged forward like a tidal wave, and I was swept along, my feet barely touching the ground. By some miracle or maybe some curse, I made it to the electronics section. There it was, the last 75-inch TV, sitting on a pallet like a prize at the end of a gladiator match. A man lunged for it, but I was faster. My hands gripped the box, and I dragged it toward the checkout, ignoring the glares and muttered curses behind me. When I got the TV home, I was exhausted but triumphant. My wife, Karen, and our son, Max, were still asleep, so I decided to surprise them. I unboxed the TV and set it up in the living room, marveling at the sheer size of it. The screen was perfect, sleek and glossy, reflecting the faint glow of the Christmas lights we'd strung up early. But something felt off. The box was heavy, but not in the way you'd expect from electronics. Felt dense, like it held something more than circuits and plastic. I brushed it off as my imagination, plugged the TV in, and turned it on. That was the first time I saw the static. The screen lit up with a crackle, but instead of the usual setup menu or logo, it was pure static. Black and white snow danced across the screen, accompanied by a low, buzzing hum. I grabbed the remote, pressing buttons at random, but nothing worked. Cheap junk, I muttered, fumbling with the cables to see if I'd missed something. That's when the static shifted. At first, it was subtle, a flicker of light, a shadow passing through the snow. Then the image cleared, revealing a dimly lit room. It looked like a basement, cluttered with boxes and tools. The camera, or whatever was showing the image, was stationary, its angle fixed on a wooden chair in the center of the room. I stared, confused, waiting for something to happen. That's when a man stepped into view. He was tall and thin, his face obscured by shadows. He dragged someone, another man, bound and gagged, into the frame and shoved him into the chair. "What the hell?" I whispered. The tall man picked up a knife from a nearby table. My stomach turned as he plunged it into the bound man's chest. Blood spraying across the screen. The victim's muffled screams filled the room, and I scrambled for the remote, desperately trying to turn the TV off. The power button didn't work. The plug wouldn't budge from the outlet. Couldn't look away. The scene changed abruptly, like someone flipping channels. Now it was a kitchen, bright and cheerful. A woman stood by the sink, humming as she washed dishes. Behind her, a shadowy figure appeared, holding a hammer. My screams joined hers as the hammer came down, blood splattering the tiled backsplash. The images kept coming. A child being dragged into the woods, a car veering off a cliff, a man locked in a cage, screaming as flames engulfed him. I finally managed to unplug the TV, yanking the cord so hard it snapped. The screen went black, and the room fell silent. I didn't tell Karen or Max what I'd seen. How could I? I chalked it up to a glitch, some sick prank by the manufacturer. But deep down, I knew better. That night, I locked the TV in the garage, hoping to forget about it. But the TV didn't want to be forgotten. Around 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of static. My heart sank as I realized it was coming from the garage. The TV had turned itself on. I crept downstairs, every instinct screaming at me to stay in bed. The garage door was ajar. the faint glow of the screen spilling into the hallway. I pushed the door open and froze. The TV wasn't showing static anymore. It was showing me. The image on the screen was my living room, filmed from an impossible angle. I saw myself standing in the doorway, my face pale and terrified. Behind me, a shadow moved, something tall and thin, the shape barely human. I spun around, but there was nothing there. When I turned back to the TV, the image had changed. Now it was Max's room. The shadow was there, standing by his bed. "Max!" I screamed, bolting up the stairs. I threw his door open, but he was sound asleep, clutching his stuffed dinosaur. The shadow was gone. Karen found me sitting by Max's bed, shaking. I didn't tell her what I'd seen, but she could tell something was wrong. "Maybe you need a break," she said gently. "This Black Friday stuff is stressing you out." She didn't understand. No one could. The next day, I tried to get rid of the TV. I dragged it to the curb, leaving it by the trash bins. But when I came back inside, it was in the living room again, sitting where I'd first placed it. Karen thought I'd brought it back in, but I hadn't touched it. I tried smashing it with a hammer. The screen cracked but didn't break. Instead, blood, actual blood, oozed from the cracks, pooling on the floor. I threw the hammer and ran, locking myself in the bathroom. That night, the dreams started. I saw the tall man standing at the foot of my bed, his face a void, his hands reaching for me. He whispered words I couldn't understand, his voice like static. When I woke, the TV was on again, the screen showing my own terrified face. I called the store, desperate for answers. The manager claimed they'd never sold TVs like the one I described. "Must be a mistake," he said. "We don't carry anything like that." I searched online for any information about the model number but found nothing. It was as if the TV didn't exist. Except it did. And it wanted something. On the third night, Karen woke to the sound of static. She found me in the living room, standing in front of the TV, a blank look on my face. I don't remember anything, but she said I was muttering the same phrase over and over. "He's coming. He's coming. He's coming." I don't live in that house anymore. After Max started waking up with bruises he couldn't explain, we left, but the TV followed me. It's in the corner of this motel room right now, dark and silent, waiting for me to plug it in. I know I shouldn't. I know what it wants, but the whispers are getting louder, and the static is already in my head. Story number 2. The Haunted Doll. If you've ever seen the chaos of Black Friday, you know it's like stepping into another world. People turn feral, clawing at each other over discounted toasters and TVs. I never thought I'd be one of them, but last year, I was, and it changed my life forever. My name is Julie, and this is the story of the doll I brought home for my daughter, Emily. I thought it was the perfect gift. I was wrong. The sale started at 5 a.m., and I was in the thick of it. The toy section at Martin's department store was a madhouse. Parents elbowing their way through crowds, grabbing whatever they could. Emily had her heart set on a doll for Christmas, and I'd been searching for weeks without luck. She wanted one of the Margot dolls, the kind that came with a wardrobe and a little brush for their perfect golden hair. I was just about to give up when I saw it. A Margot doll, sitting alone on a clearance shelf. It was beautiful, with pale skin, rosy cheeks, and long blonde curls. The price tag read $15, an unbelievable steal for something that usually cost upwards of $80. I snatched it up, ignoring the strange chill that ran through me as my fingers touched the box. The doll's glassy blue eyes seemed to stare at me, unblinking, as I carried it to the register. I told myself it was just my imagination. Emily was thrilled when I gave her the doll that night. She named it Lily, immediately brushing its hair and dressing it in one of the little outfits that came in the box. She even insisted on bringing it to the dinner table, propping it up in a chair beside her. "Do you like your new doll?" I asked as I cleared the plates. "She's my best friend now," Emily said, her voice bright. "She says she likes it here." I froze mid-step. What do you mean? Sweetie? She talks to me, Emily said, giggling. She says she's happy I picked her. I laughed it off. Kids have vivid imaginations, right? That's what I told myself. But deep down, I felt uneasy. I'd always prided myself on being rational. But something about that doll made my skin crawl. That night, I woke to a strange sound. It was faint at first, like the soft creak of a door opening. Then came a whisper, so quiet I thought I was imagining it. Julie! I sat up, my heart racing. The house was silent except for the hum of the fridge in the kitchen. I told myself it was just a dream and lay back down. The next morning, I found Lily sitting at the foot of my bed. Her head was tilted to one side, her glassy blue eyes staring up at me. Emily? I called, trying to keep my voice steady. She poked her head into my room, her hair messy from sleep. Yeah. Did you leave Lily here? Emily frowned. No. She's supposed to be in my room. I forced a smile. Maybe she fell. Come on. Let's put her back. But as I picked up the doll, I felt that chill again. His body was cold, too cold, like it had been sitting outside in the snow. And there was something else. Faint smell, like burnt wood. Over the next few days, things got worse. Lily started showing up in places she shouldn't be. In the living room, on the kitchen counter, once even in the basement. Emily insisted she hadn't moved the doll. But I didn't believe her. I thought she was playing some elaborate prank. Then came the whispers. They always started late at night, just as I was drifting off to sleep. A low, soft voice, speaking words I couldn't quite make out. At first, I thought it was Emily talking in her sleep. But when I checked on her, she was always sound asleep. The final straw came when I heard the doll whisper my name again. Julie, you can't ignore me. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed Lily and stuffed her into a box in the garage. Slamming the lid shut, Emily cried when she found out, begging me to give her doll back. But I refused. She's just a doll, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. You don't need her. Emily stared at me, her eyes wide and glassy. She's going to be mad at you. That night, I woke to the smell of smoke. Panicked, I ran to Emily's room, only to find her sitting on the floor, holding Lily. The doll's hair was singed, its once perfect dress blackened around the edges. Emily, I cried, pulling her away. What happened? She got mad, Emily whispered. She said you shouldn't have locked her up. I called the store the next day, desperate for answers. The clerk I spoke to seemed confused when I mentioned the doll. We don't sell those anymore, she said. Haven't for years. That's impossible, I said. I bought one on Black Friday. There was a long pause. Did it have a red tag? She asked finally. Yes, I said, my stomach tightening. Another pause. Then she lowered her voice. That doll belonged to a little girl who died here years ago. There was a fire. She got trapped in the toy section. I hung up, my hands shaking. I knew what I had to do. That night, I took Lily to the backyard. I poured lighter fluid over her, my hands trembling, and lit a match. The flames roared to life, devouring the doll. For a moment, I thought I heard her scream, a high, keening wail that sent shivers down my spine. When it was over, I buried the ashes and went back inside. I thought it was over. It wasn't. The whispers didn't stop. Neither did the strange sounds in the house, the creaks, the footsteps, the soft giggles. And every now and then, I catch a faint smell of burnt wood, like a warning. Emily doesn't talk about Lily anymore, but sometimes, I catch her staring out the window, her lips moving silently. And once, just once, I heard her whisper, she says she's not done yet. Story number 3. The Mall of Shadows. Black Friday had always been a joke to me, a ridiculous display of humanity's greed. People trampling over each other for a toaster or a TV. But last year, I went, not because I wanted to, but because my best friend, Tyler, convinced me. Come on, Anna, he said. grinning as he held up the flyer. The mall's staying open all night. Discounts everywhere. It'll be fun. I should have known better. I should have stayed home. Because that night, the mall wasn't just filled with deals, it was filled with something else. Something waiting in the dark. We got to the Westfield Mall at 10 p.m., and the parking lot was already packed. Lines snaked out from the entrance. Groups of shoppers clutching flyers and muttering about doorbusters. The air was sharp with cold, and the buzz of excitement hung heavy in the air. Our group consisted of 5: me, Tyler, his girlfriend Lisa, and our friends Marcus and Jenna. We didn't have a plan, just wander around, maybe pick up a few things, and laugh at the madness. The lights of the mall were bright, the Christmas decorations already up, and the sound of holiday music played over the speakers. Felt festive, almost magical. But there was something off about the crowd. I noticed it as soon as we stepped inside. People were tense. Their eyes darted around, their movements jerky, their expressions blank and strained. A man bumped into me without apologizing, his face tight with anger as he stormed toward the electronics store. A woman stood by a rack of sweaters, clutching 3 identical cardigans like they were gold bars, her knuckles white. "They look like zombies," Jenna whispered, her voice tinged with nervous laughter. "Black Friday brings out the worst in people," Lisa said, rolling her eyes. "Let's just stick together, okay?" We wandered through the mall, weaving through the crowds and dodging stray carts. Tyler grabbed a discounted drone from an electronics kiosk. Lisa found a necklace she liked, and Jenna and Marcus debated over which store to hit next. I didn't buy anything. The more I watched the crowd, the less I wanted to. By midnight, the energy in the mall had shifted. The shoppers seemed more frantic, their voices louder, their movements erratic. A man shoved a teenager to the ground to grab a gaming console, and no one stepped in. A woman screamed at a cashier over a coupon, her voice echoing through the food court. And then the lights went out. The mall plunged into darkness, and the cheerful holiday music stopped abruptly, leaving only the muffled sounds of confused voices and shuffling feet. For a moment, everything was still. Then the screaming started. It came from somewhere near the center of the mall, a high-pitched, bone-chilling shriek that echoed through the darkness. My heart raced as I fumbled for my phone, its flashlight casting a weak beam in the blackness. "Stay close," Tyler said, grabbing my arm. "We'll find an exit." The emergency lights flickered on, bathing the mall in a dim, eerie glow. The once bustling crowd had changed. People were no longer rushing to stores or arguing over items. They were standing still, their heads tilted at unnatural angles, their eyes glowing faintly in the half-light. "What the hell?" Marcus whispered. One of them moved, a tall man in a torn coat, his limbs jerking like a marionette as he turned toward us. His mouth opened, revealing jagged, blackened teeth, and he let out a guttural hiss that sent chills down my spine. "They're not people anymore," Jenna said, her voice trembling. "We need to go." We ran. The mall was a maze, its familiar corridors now distorted in the dim light. The once friendly holiday decorations looked grotesque, the oversized candy canes casting jagged shadows on the walls. The creatures, because they weren't human anymore, were everywhere. They moved in packs, their glowing eyes scanning the darkness, their twisted bodies contorting unnaturally as they searched for prey. We ducked into a clothing store, hiding behind a rack of coats. I clamped a hand over my mouth, trying to silence my ragged breathing as one of the creatures shambled past. It stopped near the entrance, sniffing the air like an animal. His face was a mask of greed, bloated, pale, its mouth twisted into a permanent snarl. "They're drawn to it," Lisa whispered, clutching Tyler's arm. "The deals, the discounts. It's like the greed made them this." I wanted to tell her she was crazy, but deep down, I knew she was right. This wasn't just a blackout. The madness of Black Friday had manifested into something real, something monstrous. We made it out of the store and into the main atrium. The escalators were frozen, the fountains silent, and the air was thick with the stench of sweat and decay. More creatures roamed the halls, some dragging broken shopping bags, others clutching mangled items like trophies. "They're everywhere," Marcus said, his voice shaking. "We're not gonna make it." "Yes, we are," Tyler said firmly. "The exits are this way. Come on." We moved cautiously, staying close to the walls, avoiding the creatures as best we could. But as we passed the electronics store, one of them spotted us. It let out a piercing shriek, its glowing eyes locking onto me. "Run!" Tyler shouted. The chase was a blur of terror. The creatures were fast, faster than they had any right to be, their clawed hands scraping against the floor as they crawled after us. We ducked into a service corridor, the narrow space amplifying their guttural growls. One of them grabbed Marcus, pulling him to the ground. He screamed as its claws tore into him, his blood splattering the walls. Lisa tried to go back for him, but Tyler pulled her away. "There's nothing we can do," he yelled, dragging her forward. We finally made it to the parking garage, the cold night air hitting me like a slap. But the creatures didn't stop. They poured out of the mall, their glowing eyes cutting through the darkness as they pursued us. Tyler shoved Lisa and me into his car, fumbling with the keys as the creatures closed in. The engine roared to life, and he floored it, the tires screeching as we sped out of the garage. The last thing I saw before we turned onto the highway was the mall, its lights flickering in the distance. The creatures stood at the entrance, watching us, their glowing eyes burning with hunger. We never spoke about what happened that night. Marcus and Jenna's families filed missing persons reports, but no one believed our story. The official explanation was a riot caused by the blackout. But I know the truth. Something in that mall wasn't human. It was born of greed and chaos, of years of trampling, shoving, and screaming over discounted goods. And every Black Friday, I hear the echoes of their shrieks in my dreams.